Elowen Pryce hated table 7. It sat near the window at the far end of the restaurant, always reserved for the same man. Mr. Aldridge. Old. Sharp-tongued. A man who dressed like he owned half of London and acted like the other half was beneath him. He never smiled. Never looked up when you greeted him. And his please or thank you had been missing for years. Elowen had served him too many times to count, and each time, she braced herself for his cold remarks. "Be careful with that tray," he'd sneer. "Wouldn't want you to trip over yourself." Others on the team made excuses when table 7 appeared on their list. They didn't want to deal with Mr. Aldridge's clipped words and silent stares. But Elowen took it, every time. Not because she liked him, but because rent didn't pay itself. Because she had siblings who looked up to her. Because life had taught her that walking away wasn't always an option. Still, that evening, something felt off. Mr. Aldridge looked paler than usual. His hands trembled slightly when he reached for his napkin. Yet, his eyes still held that cutting edge as he muttered, "Late again, Miss Pryce. Timekeeping isn't what it used to be." She swallowed the urge to snap back. "I'll get your usual, sir," she said calmly. As the evening wore on, Elowen noticed his fork barely touched his meal. He seemed distracted, breathing slower, as if each breath weighed him down. When she approached to clear his plate, his hand brushed hers, a rare accident for a man so controlled. But when she brought his bill, it happened. Mr. Aldridge's face went blank. His body slumped sideways, his glass tipping over and shattering against the floor. The restaurant froze. Conversations stopped. No one moved. Except Elowen. "Someone call an ambulance," she shouted, rushing to his side. The man who always dismissed her as the help now lay helpless on the floor, struggling to breathe. For a moment, no one else came forward. It was as if his sharp tongue had built walls too high for anyone to climb. Elowen knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she loosened his tie. "Stay with me, sir. Just stay with me." His eyes, once cold and distant, found hers. For the first time, he looked at her, not through her. His lips parted, but no words came. The paramedics arrived swiftly. As they wheeled him out, Elowen stood there, her apron stained and her heart pounding. The manager patted her on the shoulder, mumbled something about bravery, but Elowen wasn't thinking of praise. She was thinking of his eyes in that moment. The way his mask had slipped. The restaurant buzzed back to life, but Elowen's mind didn't. She kept seeing that look. Vulnerable. Human. 3 days later, when she returned for her evening shift, the hostess handed her a note. "Miss Pryce, table 7 is requesting you." Elowen Pryce stared at the note in her hand, her heart beating louder than the chatter around her. Table 7 was requesting her. She hadn't expected him to return so soon, or at all. She smoothed her apron, tried to steady her nerves, and walked towards the infamous table. But it wasn't Mr. Aldridge sitting there. It was a younger man, mid-30s perhaps, dressed in a crisp navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His face had the same sharpness as Mr. Aldridge's, but his eyes were softer. Observant. Curious. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips when he saw her. "You must be Miss Pryce," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something behind it, like he was measuring her reaction. "That's me," Elowen replied, her hands tightly gripping the notepad she didn't need. "Table 7 doesn't usually request anyone." He chuckled. "I suppose my grandfather's ways weren't exactly friendly." Elowen's eyes widened. "You're Mr. Aldridge's grandson?" He nodded. "Nathaniel Aldridge. And you saved him?" She blinked. "I did what anyone would have done." Nathaniel leaned forward, his gaze locking with hers. "No, Miss Pryce." No one else moved. That silence was heavy. It pressed down on Elowen, forcing her to shift her weight from foot to foot. "He's recovering," Nathaniel continued. "And, in his own stubborn way, he asked me to give you this." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. It felt heavier than paper should. Elowen hesitated before slipping it into her apron pocket. "I'll read it later," she said, not trusting herself to open it in front of him. Nathaniel smiled again, this time warmer. He'd like to see you, when you're ready. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Her thoughts kept returning to that envelope, to Nathaniel's words. When her shift ended, she sat in the back room, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in neat, formal script. Miss Pryce, you have every reason to despise me, yet you chose to help me. That day, I realized life had made me blind to the people who carry the weight of this world. I am not a sentimental man, but you deserve more than my silence. If you can forgive an old fool, I'd like to make things right. Charles Aldridge. Elowen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For years, she had been invisible to him. Now, suddenly, she mattered. Part of her wanted to crumple the letter and walk away. But another part, the part that had stayed calm when he was gasping for air, knew this wasn't finished. A week later, she stood outside a tall glass building in Mayfair. Aldridge and Company. Solicitors. She had been invited. The receptionist smiled when she introduced herself. Mr. Nathaniel is expecting you. Nathaniel was waiting by the elevators. His presence was different here. Confident, but still gentle. Grandfather's in the boardroom. He insisted on meeting you here. The boardroom? Elowen asked, confused. You'll see. When the elevator doors opened, Elowen's breath caught. The boardroom was filled with people in tailored suits, papers scattered across the long mahogany table. And at the head sat Charles Aldridge, looking frail but alert. His eyes found Elowen immediately, and for the first time, there was no disdain. Only gratitude. Miss Pryce, he said, voice firm despite his fragile frame. Everyone in this room owes you their time today. Because without you, I wouldn't be here to ruin their morning. The room chuckled nervously. I've made a lot of poor judgments in my life, Charles continued. But today, I intend to fix one. Elowen had no idea what was happening, until he gestured to an empty chair beside Nathaniel. This seat was always meant for a sharp mind, Charles said. Nathaniel tells me you're studying law part-time. That you've been paying your way through. That's admirable. But it's not enough. You deserve an opportunity to finish what you started. So, Miss Pryce, how do you feel about joining Aldridge and Company? Not as a server. Not as an assistant. But as a trainee. Elowen's lips parted, but no words came. The weight of every long shift, every ignored application, every quiet insult she had endured at table 7, came crashing down in that moment. I don't even have my degree yet, she stammered. Charles smiled thinly. We'll fix that. The room shifted. She could feel the glances, some surprised, some disapproving. But Nathaniel's smile was steady, reassuring. For the first time, Elowen Pryce sat at the table, not beside it. Elowen Pryce sat in the trainee office, a small glass-walled cubicle far from the grand boardroom she had stood in weeks before. The offer had felt like a fairy tale, but reality had sharp edges. The moment she walked in as a trainee, the whispers started. She's the waitress, right? Must be nice to jump ladders. I give her a month. Each comment chipped at her, but Elowen kept her head down. She studied harder, stayed later. Nathaniel checked on her often, his quiet support like a thread pulling her through the days. But even he couldn't shield her from the undercurrents. One afternoon, Elowen overheard a group of associates in the corridor. Charles Aldridge is losing it. Imagine replacing a Cambridge graduate with some charity case waitress. She'll be gone before the merger. Mark my words. The words clung to her skin like filth. That night, sitting alone in the office, she questioned everything. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe saving a life didn't make her worthy of standing beside them. But as her fingers traced the edge of her notepad, she remembered her mother's tired smile, her siblings' hopeful eyes. She couldn't afford to crumble. Not now. The real blow came 2 weeks later. Charles Aldridge collapsed again. This time, in the firm's lobby. The office buzzed with chaos. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but the whispers were louder than ever. He's dying, and he's leaving the firm in the hands of his grandson and a waitress. That night, Nathaniel found her by the emergency stairs. "They're circling like vultures," he said bitterly. "Half of them are waiting for grandfather to pass so they can tear apart what he built." Elowen looked at him, really looked. Nathaniel carried his own weight, the expectation of legacy, the pressure of being the Aldridge heir who wasn't cold enough to thrive in their world. "They don't want me here, Nathaniel. They don't deserve you here," he shot back. Before she could reply, her phone buzzed. It was a private number. Hesitant, she answered. "Miss Pryce." Charles Aldridge's voice was weaker, but his tone was still sharp. "They're going to try and push you out. You need to be ready." "How?" she whispered. "There's a merger document on my desk. It's been tampered with. They want to frame you for it. Because if you're gone, Nathaniel stands alone, and he's too polite to fight dirty." Elowen's chest tightened. A trap. She should have known. She was never meant to last here. But Charles Aldridge wasn't finished. "I was wrong about many things, Miss Pryce. But not about you. Prove them wrong." The call ended. Elowen stared into the night, the city's lights blurring with the sting in her eyes. She wanted to run, but the fire within her refused. The next morning, she arrived before dawn. Nathaniel was already there, pacing like a caged lion. "We are going to fix this," she said. He looked at her, his relief palpable. "They've already submitted the altered document to the board. We have ours." Elowen didn't waste time. She combed through every file, every email, tracing edits, matching digital fingerprints. Hours passed, but then, there it was. The digital trail leading back to one of the senior associates, the very man who had sneered at her over the coffee machine. By noon, the evidence was compiled. She and Nathaniel stormed into the boardroom where the vultures were already circling. Elowen Pryce, one of the partners, sneered. "You're not supposed to be in this meeting." "Funny," Nathaniel said coldly, "because I believe this meeting is about her." Elowen stepped forward, her hands steady as she placed the documents on the table. "I suggest you read this carefully," she said. "It's a shame. Framing a trainee is desperate. But leaving a digital trail? That's just sloppy." The silence was deafening. The guilty associate paled, his mouth opening, then closing. Charles Aldridge entered then, frail but fierce, his gaze sweeping the room. "I'm not dead yet," he said. "And neither is this firm. If any of you doubt who belongs here, I suggest you find the door before I show it to you." Elowen met the eyes of those who had whispered behind her back. They looked away first. Later, in the quiet of her cubicle, Elowen allowed herself a rare smile. The war wasn't over, but today, she had won. The weeks that followed were a blur of guarded glances and tight-lipped silences. No one whispered near Elowen Pryce anymore, but she could feel the weight of their stares. She had crossed a line they had drawn for her, and she had not apologized. Charles Aldridge's health worsened, but his mind remained sharp. He called Elowen and Nathaniel into his office one late afternoon. The city was bathed in golden light, but the mood inside was heavy. "I won't be here much longer," Charles said, his voice barely above a breath. "But before I go, this firm needs to know who holds the reins." Elowen shifted, unease twisting inside her. "Mr. Aldridge." "You saved my life twice, Miss Pryce," he interrupted gently. "Once in that cafe. Once in this firm. That's more than most of these cowards have done." Nathaniel reached out, placing a hand over hers. His grip was warm, grounding. "I've amended my will," Charles continued. "Nathaniel will take over as managing partner. And you, Elowen Pryce, will be his second in command." The words struck like a tidal wave. "That won't sit well with many," Nathaniel murmured. "Let them choke on it," Charles said, a glint of mischief in his tired eyes. "This firm was built on merit. Not birthright. Not skin color. And if they can't accept that, they're welcome to leave." Elowen left the office with her heart thudding. She had dreamed of proving herself, but never imagined the climb would be this steep, or this public. But the fight was not over. A week later, as Charles Aldridge's passing was announced, the vultures returned, veiling their ambitions behind sympathetic faces. At the official board meeting to declare the new leadership, Elowen and Nathaniel walked in, side by side. The room was packed, but it felt suffocatingly small. "Let's begin," one of the senior partners said, his tone icy. "With due respect to Mr. Aldridge's wishes, we believe." "No," Nathaniel interrupted. "You don't get to believe. You get to listen." He turned to Elowen, giving her the floor. Elowen Pryce stood straighter than she ever had. She spoke of legacy, of what Aldridge and Company was meant to stand for. Not power or prestige, but justice, opportunity, fairness. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was sharper than any shout. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, one of the older partners, the only one who had never sneered at her, stood and offered a nod of approval. Slowly, others followed. Not all, but enough. After the meeting, as the firm hummed with uneasy acceptance, Elowen stood by the tall windows of the Aldridge office. Nathaniel joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You've changed this place," he said. "I think this place changed me," she replied. "No, Elowen. You just reminded them what it should have been all along." She smiled softly, feeling the weight of the journey. That evening, as she left the building, she passed by the table where it all began. The wrong table that wasn't wrong at all. Her reflection in the glass doors showed a woman who had been underestimated, doubted, belittled. But she was still standing. Above her, the firm's logo gleamed in gold. Aldridge and Company. And inside, a new chapter had just begun. People often judge by appearances and assumptions, but respect is not given. It is earned through quiet strength, integrity, and courage to stand where others expect you to fall. Sometimes, the wrong table becomes the seat of power. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you.